100 floor dungeons. Sometimes it could be even more. Something generally added to some RPGs as either a side quest or a post-game challenge of some sort. And I'm focusing on the ones that have it as optional, so if anyone tries to joke and go, what about Persona 3? That's the main quest, so we're not counting it, even if it is a dungeon over 100 floors. I'm talking about ones that just have it. It feels like it was just kind of put there for no real reason other than, well, gotta do something for side content or post-game content. The one that made me actually question why is that to be 100 floors was as a kid playing the game Lunar Nights, and that game has a post-game dungeon that is 100 floors. I think I only made it to like 440 or so before quitting it, because one of those things thinking, why do we have a 100 floor dungeon in Lunar Nights? Like, I know it's a game where you are going through dungeons, but not strictly like a usual typical kind of RPG. I mean, I guess you could say action RPG, but it's still one of those things that's like, what the hell, man? One that immediately comes to mind is the Ghost Ship Extreme from the game Rogue Galaxy. A 104 post-game dungeon. You have to do some stuff in order to unlock, but once you go in, it's as the name says, it's a 100 floor dungeon with every 10 floors having a boss in order to try and break up the monotony of the task. But if you complete it, you do get some rewards to do so, like a new costume for the character Kasala. The thing that broke me was the fact that there are more rewards if you do the 104 dungeon again. Do it again, and you get more stuff, including another royal fruit, which you want to do the little bug minigame, you really want that, and a new suit for the character Simon, which will actually show what his appearance normally would have looked like, which is actually a very cool bonus. But why does it have to be behind doing a 100 floor dungeon twice, though? The Vanberry Tower is the post-game 100 floor dungeon for Lunar Nights, and it is also the game's epilogue of sorts for going through it, with it having bosses around every 10 floors or so in order to try and break up the monotony. But it's also another thing is the fact that you also basically get checkpoints at around every 10 floors or so, so you never have to truly begin all over when you die, just that specific section of the dungeon and everything. Despite the fact that this is an epilogue, you can start it really even early on within a second playthrough, just the fact you have to have beaten the game first. And this thing that just baffled me as a kid that Lunar Nights would have this. But screw everything I just said, I just learned about the Azure Sky Tower from Boktai 1. Apparently each Boktai gave an ultimate dungeon of sorts, and the Azure Sky Tower in Boktai 1 requires the player to not only do all the stuff or to access it, but it is a dungeon that has 99 floors. But it does not start out with 99 floors. Instead, you have to keep completing it, and it will keep adding on more and more floors to it. So you have to unlock the rest of the floors of the dungeon by repeatedly doing this over and over, which, according to people doing the math, means this 99 floor dungeon, in reality, you are completing 1,665 floors because the fact that to keep redoing it over and over until you fully actually complete the Azure Sky Tower, which is guys, this game's on Game Boy Advance with a battery and everything. I know by that point we had the SP and a chargeable battery, but it's also a game you gotta play outside, and you can't save throughout this process. Why play a challenge like this in a handheld title of all things? But people have done it. People have completed it, whether they've done it through legit means or not. People have done it. It is beatable, but it's just one of those things that I just found out exist, and I'm like, 99 floor dungeon on the GBA with Boktai. So you gotta also be in the sun in order to do it. You're asking a lot of the player. Final Fantasy X-2 has Via Infinito, which isn't a post-game dungeon per se, so that does unlock around chapter 5 or so, but you want to save it for post-game because of the fact that it has some of the toughest challenges in the game, so something you definitely want to be prepared for. But it is a 100 floor dungeon that does have a super boss waiting for you at the end. But just the fact that you do have some things to help alleviate it, such as heal spots or a teleporter so you can leave and come back, or even restart the dungeon if you choose to, which is a pretty cool aspect. Also the fact that since nowadays people play the HD version, you have the bonuses of the International Edition, which means more dress spheres to use, and also the monster catching mechanic. However, I do know there are certain tactics people used for this dungeon that did get nerfed in the International version, so there is that aspect to consider, that some tricks that people could use will no longer be as viable as an option within the HD release, so your mileage may vary on which version makes it the more preferable version to go through. Either way, this horrifyingly apparently counts for the story percentage, so if you want that bonus epilogue, you're gonna have to do Via Infinito whether you want to or not. Sphere 211 from Star Ocean till the end of time. And you know, things are already wacky when the fact that in order to fully unlock this post-game dungeon, you have to do a different post-game dungeon, the Maze of Tribulation, which is only around 10 floors or so. But Sphere 211, as the name states, is 211 floors. Granted, some of the floors are still yet to go through for the main game, and the initially first 100 floors or so are able to be done, but that's what requires a Maze of Tribulation in order to unlock the rest of the floors to fully go to floor 211. With this not only being the toughest challenge in the game, but it also boasts super bosses, including characters cameoing from the Valkyrie Profile series, which is freaking cool to include. But just one of those things where 211? Did you really need that many floors for this? And granted, those 10 at a time is one of those games where there are tricks you can do to essentially cheese the hell out of the game, whether it be making busted equipment or making it using busted skills. Shout out to Air Raid. But it's just one of those things where it's like, 211? Why that many? And the fact that it requires a different post-game super dungeon in order to even attempt to begin with to unlock this dungeon's full form. But it is cool that it is a dungeon from the main game. You're just going through these floors of the dungeon that weren't required or like super hidden off. So it is a cool aspect that narrative-wise, or not narrative, lore-wise, you're eventually going through the full depth of this dungeon more than what the characters needed to actually achieve in the main story. Also helps that despite the huge number of the floors, you still have the ability to leave and come back and to save in between the floors if you so choose to, so it's not super strict, but it is still one of those things that you just see the number and go, what the hell, man? Also helps that if you're playing on official PS2 hardware, some of those super bosses you could cheese by just opening the disc, and suddenly certain magic users just can't load in their magic for some reason. Oh, look at that. Oh, suddenly their magic is suddenly not being loaded in. That's crazy, man. How could I forget? How could I forget Bloody Palace for Devil May Cry series, with Devil May Cry 4 and 5 renditions having 101 floors, but there is also a time limit that you are working against. So you are on the clock while also trying to keep your health up for the next areas. But while there are some rest areas to work with, it is still a challenge of going through all 101 floors in that sense. You also have the Devil May Cry reboot, which also included Buddy Palace with 101 floors. Unless you're playing as Virgil, who instead has 60 floors, but that Buddy Palace is designed specifically for him, as opposed to just copying the one that Dante uses. So that is an interesting aspect to put, but it is still a massive dungeon, so yeah. And then it all truly comes back to you when you remember that Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition, the first instance of the Buddy Palace mode, has about 10,000 floors to it, with it having 3 teleporters. One being a portal that goes up by 1 but gives you a free green orb, one that goes up by 10 levels but gives you a white orb, and one that goes up by 100 but you get no reward since you're trying to get through it faster than normal. But still, 10 freaking thousand. Now you're playing the Switch version, you do have co-op for this mode as well, so you can do that, try and add a buddy to help you go through it, but still 10,000 floors is still asking a lot, especially when the fastest amount you're going up by is by 100 floors, but that also means no extra reward for you. The Tower of Prometheus for the Caligula effect too. A 100 floor dungeon that's going to be gone through after I've already completed the game, and this one has the rule set that once you go in, you can't even open the menu, so you have to already have your party formations and stuff set before going in. Every 5 floors you get to fight a boss, and which the game will then ask you if you want to leave. But if you want a checkpoint, you have to complete at least 20 floors of the dungeon to get a checkpoint in order to return. So at least there is some leeway in that sense of, okay, you can leave and come back. And all of us, we don't print out a lot, but there are several instances where games have a bunch of 4 dungeon and require you to stay in a dungeon throughout the entire time. I'm sure much earlier, Rogue Galaxy requires you to stay in the dungeon for the full 100 floors back to back to back, and you cannot leave in the middle of it. So having these 104 dungeons that can actually allow you to leave is at least something merciful, since the concept is already go through 100 floors already. On top of the fact that this one also restricts what items you're allowed to also have, making it so you can use certain items that you find within the Tower of Prometheus as well to add an extra caveat. It was actually a Tower of Prometheus that made me want to even do a video about 100 floor dungeons, because of the fact that by that point I've gone through many years without seeing an RPG go, and here's an optional 100 floor dungeons a bonus, and then Caligula Effect 2 is like, nope, here you go, Tower of Prometheus, 104 dungeon, get to it. What do you mean Final Fantasy 15 is a 104 dungeons and I'm only now just learning about? But the Staylift Grove, a dungeon that you do have to go in earlier on chapter 7 for the story, but its true menace does not unlock until around chapter 15, where after filling several side quests, you unlock the key in order to access the 104 dungeon within. And there are campsites every around 10 floors or so, I believe, in order to help alleviate issues you may have in it, but still just the audacity of Final Fantasy 15 of all things having a 104 dungeon just makes me go, who gave the developers the rights? But either way, 104 dungeon, with there being floors that could just comprise of one type of enemy all over the place, just to really mess with you. And honestly, it doesn't sound all too bad considering Final Fantasy 15 lets you carry so many healing items on you that honestly getting a game over is way harder than it actually sounds to happen. So honestly, not that bad of an idea for a 104 dungeon, this kind of game. It's just more the fact that everything this game doesn't have, they added in a 104 dungeon, and apparently that's not even required for a platinum trophy, considering I got the platinum trophy and even though this dungeon even existed in the game. So weird how this one is really off to the side, doesn't give you a royal arm, doesn't give you a trophy either. It's just a 104 dungeon for the love of the game. You know what? That's all right. Scary part is, for the Disgaea franchise, there's not even a particular locale or dungeon when it comes to 100 floor dungeon. Items are just legendary rarity, at least in Disgaea 1, will just have 100 floors in them, because how Disgaea works with the item world, where every item has a dungeon they can go into in order to make the item more powerful. The higher the rarity, the more floors it has, with legendary items having 100 floors, and a special boss called the Item God waiting for you at the end of that 100 floors. So there's not even a specific locale or anything I can really say of where to get 104 dungeon, because potentially there could be several or many 104 dungeons within the Disgaea franchise, considering how the games function. Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins 2nd DLC, Wanderers of the Rift, introduces the Rift Labyrinth, a 104 dungeon that is also a roguelike-esque mode, considering the portals you go through do have different condition stipulations for the enemies inside, on top of the aspect of you can also just lose chunks of your full HP bar and everything in it, and also gain new types of items. On top of also trying to do this monster raising mechanic where you're able to get these monsters and try and make them more powerful to get better gear from them, and stuff like that. When it comes to the main story of Wanderers of the Rift, you only have to actually do about 21 floors in order to actually complete the DLC story. But like I said, it's a 100 floor dungeon, and after they also released the last DLC, Different Future, it now goes beyond 100 floors to also include enemy types from that last DLC that they introduced, so in reality, it's now a 100 plus floor dungeon, so it just keeps on going, and going. And this dungeon also does penalize you if you do use the Chaos Mode ability in order to try and make things easier on yourself. So they want you to go through it all natural and not just try and cheese things with the Chaos Mode. The Forest of Pain from Dante GU Volume 3 Redemption, treated as an in-universe rumor of a location that seems like it wasn't even actually put into the world, the in-game MMO, by the actual company CC2, this dungeon is a 100 floor dungeon that has possibly 5 floors and special challenges within certain blocks of the dungeon in order to help give you items if you complete those challenges. But another reason we want to do the Forest of Pain is because there is story significance after having completed it. So there is a story reason for why you want to complete the dungeon. I just think it's also neat that it's also just within the universe of .hack, this urban legend locale that technically shouldn't even actually exist in the game, and that other players aren't even sure about it. Even having a bit of a mention as well within the .hack Roots anime, which is a prequel anime for .hack GU as well. So if you saw it from Roots, there will be a bit more significance with that. Like I said, its main purpose is to essentially be an epilogue for Volume 3. And that's also what I want to ramble about, because this is a topic I want to ramble about for freaking years, because it's one of those things that, you know, as a kid, and still one of those things I'm like, why always 100 floors? Like, I know there are other games that don't have 100 floors, like The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker and Twilight Princess have dungeons that go to 50 floors, or how Yakuza Dead Souls also has a dungeon that can go upwards of 30 floors, so it's not always 100, but a lot of times, it's still 100 floors. But that Boktai 1 dungeon, the Azure Sky Tower, I did not know about until doing this voiceover and just being like, oh, why would you do it like that? Kind of thing. But it is just a challenge for developers, or sometimes has some story significance in the case of .hack GU. Either way, it's supposed to be a fun challenge that's also easier for developers to make, since making 100 procedure generated floors is probably a lot simpler than making an entire dedicated bonus dungeon or whatever. And like I said, like Persona 3, because that's the entire game, so that's not a bonus dungeon, so not counting that. Alrighty then, go out there, play games where they have 104 dungeons or not, or maybe you just enjoy the 104 dungeon, going through a long trek, maybe soothing to you, and not tedious as people tend to see them as and everything. I mean, Disgaea fans love Disgaea, and Disgaea with the Item World has long dungeons or to improve your gear, and people enjoy the bonus content of Disgaea, so there are fans out there who do just enjoy that kind of aspect of a game. Alrighty then, good day.